There is a point in the center of the Pacific Ocean that sailors call the Pole of Inaccessibility. It is the loneliest place on Earth, the furthest you can possibly be from any continent, in any direction. And near this point of absolute isolation lies a tiny speck of volcanic rock, a triangle of land, thousands of miles from South America, thousands of miles from Tahiti, surrounded by the crushing blue emptiness of the greatest ocean on our planet. We call it Easter Island. Its people called it Rapa Nui, the navel of the world. And on this impossible, lonely island stand giants, carved from the hardened heart of a volcano, some weighing more than a space shuttle, some standing as tall as a 4-story building. Hundreds of them, silent, brooding, timeless. Their faces are long and solemn, their lips pursed in a silent command. Their eyes stare out from deep, shadowy sockets that were once filled with brilliant white coral and red scoria pupils. They are the Moai. But here is the strangest thing about them, the great secret that is hidden in plain sight. Almost all of them turn their backs to the sea. They do not look out at the vast horizon as if watching for visitors or scanning for threats. They look inland. They stare with their blind coral eyes over the empty, windswept, rolling hills of their island. So the question is not just how they were made. The real questions are far deeper. What are they watching? Or who are they watching over? Who were the people who could carve these titans from the earth and then move them for miles across difficult terrain with nothing but stone tools and human ingenuity? And most importantly, where did the people who accomplished this impossible feat go? To begin to answer these questions, we must first look beyond the stone giants, because the statues are not the only secret this island holds. The ancient people of Rapa Nui left behind another clue to their world, one that is perhaps even more mysterious. The silent scribes. The Moai giants are the island's most famous mystery, but they are not its deepest. Because in the 19th century, after European contact, another discovery was made. Something small, something easily overlooked, found in the last remaining homes of the Rapa Nui people. Wooden tablets and other artifacts, covered in strange, elegant, beautifully carved symbols. It is called Rongo Rong, Rongo Rongo Rongo, and it is a complete, fully developed system of writing. This, by itself, is an almost impossible fact. Writing has only been independently invented a handful of times in all of human history, in Mesopotamia, in Egypt, in China, in Mesoamerica. And somehow, on the most isolated, most remote inhabited island on the entire planet, these people did it too. They invented their own unique language of symbols, a system that belongs to no other on Earth. These tablets hold the key. They could contain the island's history, the secrets of how the Moai were moved, the songs, the prayers, and the genealogies of the people who carved them. But there is one final, heartbreaking problem. No one alive can read it. The knowledge was lost. Wiped out by the slave trades and diseases that devastated the island in the 1860s, the last scribes, the last elders who knew the secret of Rongo Rongo, died, taking the key to their world with them. So we are left with a library of books we cannot read, a message from a vanished civilization, written in a code we cannot crack. The symbols are beautiful, Birds, fish, crescent moons, human figures, they are clearly telling a story. But it is a story told in a language of ghosts. So now we have two impossible mysteries on this one tiny island: an army of stone giants and a collection of unreadable texts. To even begin to understand these puzzles, we must first reconstruct the world that created them. We must go back to the beginning, to the golden age of Rapa Nui, back when the island was not a barren rock, but a lush green paradise. The Golden Age. To understand these mysteries, we must go back to the beginning. Long before the first Europeans ever dreamed of the Pacific, another group of the greatest explorers in human history were already its masters: the Polynesians. Sometime around the year 1200 AD, after a journey of thousands of miles in open ocean canoes, guided only by the patterns of the stars and the feel of the currents, they found it, a small, uninhabited island. Welcome, so Rapa Nui. And the island they found was not the barren, windswept rock we see today. It was a subtropical paradise. Scientific analysis of ancient pollen trapped in the island's crater lakes tells us that Rapa Nui was once covered in a dense forest of giant palm trees, a species now extinct, some of the largest in the world. Freshwater lakes shimmered in the volcanic craters. The soil was fertile, the sea was rich with fish, and millions of seabirds nested on its shores. For those first arrivals after their long, perilous journey, it must have seemed like they had found heaven. And in this perfect isolation, over hundreds of years, they built a complex and unique society. They divided into different clans, each led by a powerful chieftain. They had a class of priests who understood the movements of the stars and the will of the gods. And they had guilds of master craftsmen and engineers, the ones who would soon turn their attention to the island's soft, workable, volcanic stone. Like many Polynesian cultures, the people of Rapa Nui worshipped their ancestors. They believed the spirits of their great leaders, their spiritual power, or mana, protected the living, ensuring good harvests and a healthy community. And to honor these powerful ancestors and to channel their protective mana, they began to carve. At first, the statues were small, human-sized. But as the society grew, as the clans became more powerful and began to compete with each other for status and the favor of the gods, so too did the statues. Bigger, prouder, more ambitious. This was the Golden Age of Rapa Nui, a period of relative peace, prosperity, and incredible artistic and engineering achievement. A unique civilization flourishing alone at the end of the world. But this Golden Age contained the seeds of its own destruction. Their devotion to their ancestors was about to become a dangerous obsession, a fever that would grip the entire island and consume their paradise. The obsession. It began as an act of piety, an offering to the ancestors, but it became a rivalry, an island-wide obsession, a fever carved in stone. The clans of Rapa Nui began to compete. The ultimate display of a chief's power, his spiritual authority, his clan's prestige, was to erect the biggest and most impressive moai on the grandest stone platform. Imagine the sheer scale of the effort. In a single volcanic quarry, Rano Raraku, hundreds of these giants were carved directly from the bedrock by teams of master craftsmen using only harder stone tools called toki. But carving them was the easy part. The real monumental challenge was moving them. Some of these statues weighed over 80 tons. They had to be transported for miles across the island's rolling, difficult terrain. Scientists believe they did it using a system of ropes, woven from the island's trees, and a vast number of log rollers, cut from the great palm forest. It would have taken hundreds of people, working for months, chanting and pulling in unison, to move a single medium-sized statue just a few miles. And the statues just kept getting bigger. The demand for wood, for rope, for food to feed the legion of workers became insatiable. The dominant sound on the island was no longer the wind whistling through the trees, but the constant thud, thud, thud of stone axes, felling the great palm forest that had sustained their people for centuries. The trees fell faster than they could ever regrow. And as the last great palms were cut down, the world of the Rapa Nui began to unravel. Without the massive tree trunks, they could no longer build the great ocean-going canoes that had brought their ancestors there. They were trapped. Their connection to the vast ocean was severed. Without the tree cover, the fertile topsoil, exposed to the wind and rain, began to erode and wash into the sea. The crop yields began to fail. The seabirds, their forest nesting grounds gone, disappeared. A vital source of food vanished. In their obsessive quest to honor their ancestors and secure their future through spiritual power, they were systematically destroying the very resources they needed to physically survive. The island paradise was becoming a barren prison. And as the resources dwindled and the hunger grew, the intense rivalry between the clans was about to turn from a competition of stone into a war of blood. The Statue Wars. A society without resources is a society without peace. The golden age of Rapa Nui was over. The age of war had begun. The clans, once peaceful rivals in a competition of artistry, were now bitter enemies in a desperate war for the last remaining scraps of food and fertile land. Archaeological evidence from this period shows a dramatic shift. The population retreated from their open villages into fortified caves. They began mass-producing sharp, black, obsidian spearheads called mataya. The tools of creation were replaced with the tools of war, and the oral traditions of the Rapa Nui people, passed down for generations, speak of this dark time. They call it the Huri Moi, the statue toppling. And then they did the unthinkable, the one final act that proved their world had truly and completely collapsed. They turned their fury on the gods. Clans, armed with their new obsidian weapons, would raid their rivals' territory. But they weren't just attacking the people. They were attacking the very source of their enemy's spiritual power. They would tie thick ropes around the necks of the great Moi, the sacred, watchful effigies of their rivals' ancestors, the very statues their own grandfathers had helped to raise. And they would pull. Imagine the sight: 100 desperate men, straining, heaving, and screaming in unison to bring a titan crashing to the ground. The earth would have shaken as the 80-ton giant fell, face first, into the dirt. Its brilliant coral eyes, once staring watchfully over the land, now shattered against the earth it was meant to protect. This was the ultimate act of desecration. It was not just breaking a statue. It was killing an ancestor. It was destroying your enemy's mana, their spiritual protection. It was a declaration that the old gods, the old ways, had failed them. One by one, across the barren island, the great statues fell. The silent guardians of Rapa Nui were silenced forever. Back at the quarry, Rano Rodaku, hundreds of unfinished statues were abandoned almost overnight, including the largest moai ever attempted, a gigante, a monster that would have been over 70 feet tall. The stone tools were dropped. The work stopped. The great obsession was finally over. All that was left was a broken people on a broken island, surrounded by the bodies of their fallen stone giants. The empty paradise. The wars eventually ended. Not with a clear victor, but with mutual, utter exhaustion. A grim, quiet peace fell over the island. But the paradise they had been fighting for no longer existed. The great palm forest was gone. Completely. The last tree had been cut down to move the last statue. Without the tree roots to hold it together, the island's once rich topsoil eroded, washing into the sea, leaving behind barren, infertile ground, exposed to the harsh Pacific winds. The springs and streams began to dry up. The once abundant seabird colonies with nowhere left to nest vanished from the island's shores. The island could no longer support a large population. The Rapa Nui people, who had once numero as many as 15,000 at their peak, were now reduced to just a few thousand survivors, clinging to a life of subsistence farming and occasional cannibalism on a depleted, dying land. And it was into this broken world that the first European ships arrived on Easter Sunday, 1722. The Dutch admiral Jacob Roggeveen was the first to land, and he was thoughtful, deeply confused by what he saw. On one hand, he saw the magnificent, giant statues, many now toppled, which clearly suggested a powerful, organized, and advanced civilization. But on the other hand, he saw a sparse population of people living in squalor, with no great trees, and only small, leaky canoes, completely unfit for the open ocean. He could not reconcile the two things. How could these poor, struggling people have created these stone titans? The mystery had begun. The arrival of the outside world was the final, tragic blow. Peruvian slave raiders in the 1860s kidnapped nearly half of the remaining population, including the king and the last elders who knew the secrets of the Rongorongo script. The diseases the sailors brought with them, smallpox and tuberculosis, killed most of the rest. By the end of the 19th century, the Rapa Nui civilization was functionally extinct. Fewer than 200 people remained. Their golden age was a forgotten memory. Their unique language was nearly silent. Their paradise was empty. For over a century, the story ended there. A sad, simple tale of a self-destructive people. But modern science has begun to piece together the clues, looking for a more detailed truth. The investigation was not over. The modern investigation. For over a century, the story of Rapa Nui ended there. A sad, simple tale of a self-destructive people, leaving behind a mystery no one could solve. But the island is no longer just a crime scene. It is now a laboratory, being investigated by a new kind of detective. Archaeologists, paleobotanists, and experimental engineers, armed with tools that allow them to read the island's hidden memory. The first great breakthrough came not from a statue, but from the bottom of the island's crater lakes. By drilling long cores deep into the mud, scientists could extract ancient pollen, perfectly preserved for thousands of years. And this pollen told the unambiguous story of the lost forest. They identified the pollen of a giant extinct palm tree, a relative of the Chilean wine palm that once covered the island. It proved definitively that Rapa Nui was not always barren. The oral traditions of the elders were true. But the greatest practical question remained: how did they move the Moai? For decades, the world assumed they must have used thousands of log rollers, a theory that helped explain the deforestation. But modern experimental archaeology has revealed a more elegant and far more incredible solution. Inspired by the Rapa Nui legends that the statues walked to their platforms, teams of researchers have shown that it's possible. With just 3 teams of rope pullers, a replica Moai can be rocked side to side on its heavy, curved base, shuffling forward in a surprisingly effective walking motion. The giants likely did not roll. They walked. An amazing feat of collaborative engineering and physics, and we can still see the evidence of their great work. A network of ancient roads, worn smooth by the transport of hundreds of statues, still crisscrosses the island. In the quarry, we find thousands upon thousands of the simple stone tools they used, the toki. Scientists have calculated that a dedicated team of a dozen carvers could have finished a medium-sized Moai in about a year. It wasn't magic. It was organized, obsessive, and dedicated hard work. So, modern science has begun to answer the how. It has proven the legends were not just stories. It has given us a clear picture of the incredible ingenuity of the Rapa Nui people. But in solving these practical mysteries, science has only deepened the final, more important question. We now know, in detail, what the people of Rapa Nui did, but we are still left to wonder. The island at the end of the world. Why did a society so clever, so organized, walk itself willingly off an ecological cliff? The answer, perhaps, is the most human answer of all: pride, competition, and a deeply held belief that the resources would last forever, that the gods, honored by their great stone statues, would always provide. Each clan, in their escalating rivalry to build a grander Moai, likely saw the felling of one more tree as a small necessary price for prestige and the favor of the ancestors. Unable or unwilling to see the collective catastrophe they were creating, one tree at a time. And this is why the story of this tiny, remote island in the middle of the ocean continues to haunt us. Because the story of Rapa Nui is the story of planet Earth in miniature. A small, isolated island floating in a vast empty sea of space, with a finite supply of resources and a population of competing tribes, consuming those resources at an unsustainable rate. The people of Rapa Nui had nowhere else to go. When they cut down their last tree, they could not build a canoe to escape. Their fate was sealed. They are a case study, a laboratory experiment in societal collapse left for us to find. Their story is a warning, carved in stone and written in the dust of a fallen forest, a cautionary tale about the dangers of short-term rivalry, blinding us to the necessity of long-term survival. It reminds us that the most advanced societies can collapse under the weight of their own unsustainable success. Today, the great Moai still stand guard, some re-erected by archaeologists, most still lying broken and defeated where they fell during the statue wars. They are no longer just statues of ancestors. They are silent witnesses. Witnesses to the incredible heights a culture can achieve and the terrifying depths to which it can fall. And they stare out over their empty, barren island with a quiet, timeless warning for the rest of us, living on our own, much larger island, floating in the vast, silent emptiness of space.
More stories they tried to erase.